At the end of the day, it's night. Oh boy, this album was a journey from which I will never recover. Still singing about Diana Agron in 2024, huh? Guess it's only been over a decade. Don't worry, we lesbians understand not getting over anybody ever at all, actually. To be fair, if I'd had a situationship with Diana Agron, if I'd even made eye contact with Diana Agron, I too would be writing about it years later. Let's just all be honest here. When Stevie Nicks writes you a poem, you know that you're God's favourite. When I first saw the track titles for the Tortured Poets Department, before its release, I did not think that there would be much to deconstruct in terms of Sapphic Themes and Taylor's lesbian activity at all. And I actually wondered if in fact Taylor had kind of moved away from including or intertwining Sapphic themes in her work. She's been giving off a preference for men vibe lately, so I thought maybe, those days were gone, perhaps. People change, I don't know. But oh dear God, was I mistaken. I was wrong. There is an overwhelming amount of Sapphic content in this album. Oh my God. I have not slept in 5 days. I haven't eaten. And just when I thought I'd rounded up all of the Sapphic themes and connections in the Tortured Poets Department, she then drops the anthology and there was so much more. I may have lost my sanity. This button always comes undone in my videos. If you see it come undone, it represents my inner keeping it togetherness, which is becoming undone. Okay. Why do you embarrass me in front of the people? Hi guys, welcome to a video, and in today's video we're just going to be discussing the Sapphic themes in the Tortured Poets Department, the anthology by one Miss Taylor Swift. As a disclaimer, I'm only going to be discussing the tracks on the album which, in my opinion, contain Sapphic themes. I'm not going to be discussing the tracks which, again, in my opinion, centre on other things such as relationships with men, with fame, with mental health, and so on. Because this album, it's a spectrum of a lot, and this video is just about the gay part of it, bisexual part of it. I don't really know what's the visits women once in a while part of it. I don't know. So the first thing we should discuss in terms of the Sapphic themes for this album is the Tortured Poets Department Spotify Library themed art installation, which was curated to represent the record. Because there were a couple of visual clues in that installation which allude to this album containing Sapphic themes. The first and the most obvious is the dried lavender, because of course lavender has very strong associations with lesbianism and same-sex relationships. For example, the Lavender Menace, lavender marriages, and so on. And yes, lavender can also represent purity, protection, and calmness. But does this album really evoke any of those three words? I do not think so. Could the dried lavender also be a nod to the song Lavender Haze? Absolutely, but again, considering the whole 70s concept for the Lavender Haze music video, the very same decade where lavender was pretty much synonymous with lesbianism, particularly in the USA, it doesn't really make any difference in terms of it being a Sapphic clue because of what lavender represents. Like with everything, it's open to interpretation, but Taylor knows what she's doing, using lavender, particularly within the context of the 70s. I mean, come on. And then you have a noticeable amount of daisies. And of course, daisies in Taylor's work are very much associated with Karlie Kloss, since Karlie once tagged Taylor as a daisy on Instagram after their trip to Big Sur together. So their inclusion in the art installation suggests Karlie is a muse for some of the songs on this album. There are also dried Cornelia roses, which is likely a nod to the song Cornelia Street. It's a very popular theory that Cornelia Street is about Lily Donaldson, since Lily would often visit Taylor at her townhouse on Cornelia Street when she was living there, alongside a lot of very obvious connections that have been drawn between the two of them and the Lover album. I will link the Tilly master post down below. I don't have time to go into it here because it's a Lord of the Rings special extended edition of lesbian gossip. I don't know. So this points to Lily as potentially another muse for some of the songs on the Tortured Poets department also. Another point of interest is that the dried Cornelia rose and dried lavender are placed next to one another inside a cage. This has multiple interpretations, but to me it suggests that either Lavender Haze and Cornelia Street share the same muse, or that the Cornelia Street muse is a woman because of what lavender represents. And the flowers are placed inside a cage together to represent that Taylor feels trapped by being unable to come out about that side of her life. Speaking of muses, there is also the bust of Diana, who in Roman religion was the goddess of wild animals and the hunt, and in Greek mythology she was known as the goddess Artemis. What's interesting is there are a lot of theories that Artemis was in fact a lesbian, and although there is a lot of debate around this for various reasons, she is still often upheld as a lesbian figure. But in any case, this is not the first time Taylor has used the image of Diana in her work, and it's theorised that her inclusion of Diana is a nod to Diana Agron, and the bust being a part of the installation suggests that Diana is yet another muse for some of the songs in this album. The next clue is the bust, which appears to be Sappho. There's been debate that it's various other figures, and it could well be, but the lyre and the poetry concept of the Tortured Poets department makes Sappho the most plausible choice. Sappho is not only famous for being a poet, in fact she's one of the most famous figures of poetry in the world, but she composed and sung her poems to the lyre. So there's a connection there between the poetry aspect, but there's also a connection between the poetry made for music aspect here. And of course, she is symbolic of love between two women, because her work famously contains themes of sapphic desire. And in fact, the word sapphic is derived from her name. So the inclusion of her image in the art installation is very significant. Art installation aside, the other thing I picked up on is in the summary poem for the Tortured Poets department vinyl, Taylor writes, "He never even scratched the surface of me, none of them did." And she writes this within the context of a poem about leaving one man for another. And what's interesting is that she says he never even scratched the surface of me. And then she goes on to say none of them did, which suggests that there's a link between the he and the them, meaning that potentially all of them are a he. And this can be interpreted as her saying that all of her relationships with men have been shallow and have been superficial. Now, I know that sounds like it might be a bit of a reach, but there is a recurring theme in this album about men as pretenses and consolation prizes. It's in the lyrics. So from that angle, the summary poem is another piece of evidence, if you like, that her relationships with men don't run deep. Why that is, it's 2024. I don't know. I mean, this whole album sounds to me like she's just lamenting over the women that she's lost and, you know, bitter about the men that she's had to date instead because, you know, what else was there to do? I don't know. I mean, the plight of the bisexual. I'm gonna get cancelled again. And on that note, let's get into the album. So the first track that we're going to be discussing is Down Bad. Now, in terms of the title, the phrase down bad has a double meaning. The first being that you have an intense infatuation with a love interest, and the second being that you're badly depressed, and both of these meanings are relevant to the song lyrics, since Taylor is describing how she's down bad for someone and down in a bad way because of them. The lyrics read, "Did you really beam me up in a cloud of sparkling dust just to do experiments on? Tell me I was the chosen one. Show me that this world is bigger than us. Then send me back where I came from. For a moment, I knew cosmic love. Now, the line just to do experiments on is, of course, in relation to the alien theme of the song, but it also taps into the notion of romantic experimentation, and romantic experimentation is something Sapphic women often experience with other women who want to use them to experiment their sexuality on. And from these lyrics, we see that this person has experimented with Taylor and then put her, or whoever the song's point of view is from, back on the shelf. Now I'm down bad, crying at the gym. Everything comes out, teenage petulance. The mention of a gym is interesting because it's well documented that Taylor and Carly used to work out together at the gym. In fact, workouts were a big part of their relationship, and Taylor and Lily famously used to attend the same gym too. Of course, the mention of a gym might not mean anything, as Tay likely uses the gym quite a lot, regardless of the women that she's with, but within the context of this song, I think it's interesting that she mentioned it and could point to a possible connection to either Carly or Lily. Did you take all my old clothes just to leave me here naked and alone? In a field in my same old town that somehow seems so hollow now. They'll say I'm nuts if I talk about the existence of you. The lines, did you take all my old clothes just to leave me here naked and alone, suggest that this person took Taylor's old clothes, presumably to wear, which points to that person being a woman. Of course, it's possible a man could take her old clothes, but not quite as likely. And then you have the lines, they'll say I'm nuts if I talk about the existence of you, which reads to me as though Taylor thinks people would perceive her as delusional if she discusses this person out loud, which could potentially be either because this person is married or just a curious straight girl making Taylor sound crazy if she talks about this person within a romantic context. Down bad like I lost my twin. Fuck it if I can't have him. Down bad. So Like I Lost My Twin is interesting because Carly has famously been referred to as Taylor's twin, which strengthens the theory that this song is about Carly. But that aside, Taylor describing somebody as her twin would more likely be a reference to a woman than it would be to a man. I loved your hostile takeovers, encounters closer and closer, all your indecent exposures. Indecent exposures stand out here because exposure is related to photography. And of course, both Lily and Carly are models, but Carly in particular did some indecent exposure in her photo shoots. So despite the male pronouns, the lyrics in this song do point to the muse being a woman, and I also think it's interesting that Taylor switches between you, us, and him when talking about this person, because it mirrors the situationship between her, Carly, and Josh. That could just be a coincidence, and I'm interested to know what you guys think. But yes, this one is definitely for the Sapphic Vaults. The next track we're going to be discussing is But Daddy, I Love Him. And the title here is a quote taken from the Disney film The Little Mermaid. And there have been connections made between this song and Harry Styles because of the title. Not only because he once wore a shirt with But Daddy, I Love Him on it, but also the song is very much about people being judgmental over Taylor's relationship and thinking it could ruin her name. And I can sort of see that people may have judged her relationship with Harry based on the fact that he was bisexual, gender non-conforming, and potentially playing the field. However, I don't think he works as a muse for this song in the sense that a relationship with him would have been damaging to her name. The only man I can think of who would potentially lower her image is Matty Healy, because her associations with him were largely frowned upon, especially by quite a bit of the fandom. And I can absolutely see people in Taylor's life looking down on him too because of the way he presents himself and behaves. That said, if you ignore the male pronouns in this song, it could also potentially be about dating a woman, because that is something that that would both impact Taylor's career and cause people to be judgmental. What's more is that at the 2014 Victoria's Secret fashion show, Lily did an interview where she mentioned Ariel from The Little Mermaid as her favourite cartoon character. And not only did Taylor play a song from The Little Mermaid to Lily and her Thanksgiving guests on the piano in 2016, she also dressed as Ariel for New Year's Eve in 2018. So there's a potential connection between this song and Lily from the title too. To be honest, I'm a little bit on the fence about this song being sapphic, but I'm including it just in case. So the lyrics read, "I forgot how the West was won. I forget if this was ever fun. I just learned these people only raise you to cage you. Sarah's and Hannah's in their Sunday best, clutching their pearls, sighing, what a mess. I just learned these people try and save you, 'cause they hate you. Too high a horse for a simple girl to rise above it. They slammed the door on my whole world, the one thing I wanted." So these lines are Taylor describing the people she grew up around as judgmental and critical, especially towards a person who she was presumably in love with. And as a result, she feels caged in by those criticisms. What's interesting is she mentions Sarah's and Hannah's here, but if we go back to the title of this song, "But Daddy, I Love Him," it's possible Taylor is suggesting that her father is among those people. Now I'm running with my dress unbuttoned, screaming, "But Daddy, I love him. I'm having his baby. No, I'm not, but you should see your faces. I'm telling him to floor it through the fences. No, I'm not coming to my senses. I know he's crazy, but he's the one I want. Dutiful daughter, all my plans were laid. Tendrils tucked into a woven braid. Growing up precocious sometimes means not growing up at all. He was chaos, he was revelry. Bedroom eyes like a remedy. Soon enough the elders had convened down at the city hall." In these lines, Taylor is describing how she's broken free from the metaphorical cage that she's trapped in with the person she loves, and as a result, people have gathered to discuss what can be done about it. This suggests that her relationships are not her own, and that other people are far too invested in that part of her life for various reasons. The line "tendrils tucked into a woven braid" is particularly telling here. Taylor is saying anything that fell out of line was quickly tucked back into place. There was no room for Taylor to be messy, no room for her to be free. Stay away from her, the saboteurs protested too much. Lord knows the words we never heard, just screeching tires of true love. What's interesting is the "stay away from her" is carefully placed. So we don't know if the saboteurs are aiming it at Taylor or the person she's running away with. And of course, if it is aimed at Taylor, it means the person she's running away with is a her. I'll tell you something right now. I'd rather burn my whole life down than listen to one more second of all this bitching and moaning. I'll tell you something about my good name. It's mine alone to disgrace. I don't cater to all these vipers dressed in empath's clothing. God save the most judgmental creeps who say they want what's best for me, sanctimoniously performing soliloquies I'll never see, thinking it can change the beat of my heart when he touches me and counteract the chemistry, undo the destiny. You ain't gotta pray for me and my wild boy and all of his wild joy. If all you want is grey for me, that's just white noise, that's just my choice. There's so much to unpack in these lines. The "I'll tell you something about my good name, it's mine alone to disgrace" is Taylor talking about how other people shouldn't be concerned with the decisions that she's making reflecting badly on herself, because her name is hers alone to ruin. And if we look at the words that she's using to describe these people, vipers, judgmental creeps, and so on, it's also very telling of her perception of the people she's surrounded by, and it also suggests that those people have repeatedly hammered home that she has a certain image to maintain and so should therefore act accordingly. And that's why they have an issue with Taylor's lover. The mention of sanctimonious, morally righteous, and judgmental very much mirrors the attitude that homophobes have towards same-sex relationships, particularly the morally righteous part, because of course Taylor grew up in the Bible Belt and she has described herself as a Christian in the past, so she would have certainly encountered homophobic attitudes in her circles. And that's potentially what she's referring to in this song. There's a lot of people in town that I bestow upon my fakest smiles. Scandal does funny things to pride, but brings lovers closer. The mention of pride here is significant because pride obviously has a connection to gay pride. So the line, scandal does funny things to pride, but brings lovers closer, is Taylor saying scandal affects same-sex attracted people and same-sex relationships in strange ways, but can also bring the people in those relationships closer together. I know it's crazy, but he's the one I want. I'll tell you something right now, you ain't gotta pray for me. Me and my wild boy and all of his wild joy. If all you want is grave for me, that's just white noise, that's my choice. Now, what's interesting here is the mention of grey, which has come up before in her previous work, such as in Gold Rush. And in Gold Rush, Taylor uses grey to represent the mundane reality, as a contrast to what she really desires. There's a recurring theme in Taylor's work where she intertwines love and colour, or references colour to describe love. And this often includes rainbows, which has obvious connotations to same-sex relationships due to the gay pride flag. So it's interesting that grey serves as a contrast to all of that colour, which potentially has a connection to same-sex relationships. So in But Daddy I Love Him, If All You Want Is Grey For Me, is Taylor telling those people that if they want her life to be drained of colour, that it's just background noise which doesn't register with her. I'm a little bit undecided about how sapphic this song really is. There's certainly a lot of references to things that only really apply to same-sex relationships. What I will say is this song really reminds me of Tay Liz, just because Liz was known to be a wild card and allegedly asked to leave Taylor's crew because of it, which certainly indicates that people had a problem with her. And back then, the fact that Liz was a woman and allegedly romantically involved with Taylor would have been a huge issue for Taylor's brand and image, especially if that had got out back then. All of that just really tracks with this song, and I don't know, anytime a wild person is mentioned, I just know she's talking about Liz. I just know. This one is a maybe for me because the mention of a baby does throw me off. But then again, this song is overwhelmingly sapphic coded, so we'll place it in the sapphic vault anyway, just gingerly. The next track we're going to be discussing is Fresh Out the Slammer. Now, the title is a phrase which means newly getting out of a prison, and within the context of the lyrics, it's likely Taylor used this title as a reference to being fresh out of a relationship that felt like a prison. The lyrics read, "Now pretty baby, I'm running back home to you. Fresh out the slammer, I know who my first call will be too." So the first thing that stands out to me here is pretty baby, because pretty is something that is much more attributed to women than it is to men, especially followed by baby. It's almost infantilizing and therefore more commonly said to women. He doesn't understand me, splintered back in winter, silent dinners bitter, he was with her in dreams. These lines suggest the person that Taylor was with may have been in love with someone else, and therefore lost interest in her. From the rest of the lyrics, and as the title suggests, it sounds as though this relationship was miserable and felt like a prison to Taylor. And of course, the "he doesn't understand me" takes us back to the summary poem from the beginning, where she said, "He never even scratched the surface of me," which reiterates that notion of disconnect between Taylor and the he. "To the house where you still wait up and that porch light gleams. To the one who says I'm the girl of his American dreams." The mention of a porch light here is potentially a reference or a connection to the song Cardigan. And of course, it's heavily theorized that Cardigan was about Diana, potentially making Diana the pretty baby Taylor is talking about in this song. And no matter what I've done, it wouldn't matter anyway. Ain't no way I'm gonna screw up now that I know what's at stake here. At the park where we used to sit on children's swings, wearing imaginary rings. Wearing imaginary rings is interesting, and I think it possibly refers to the fact that Taylor first met this person before gay marriage was legalized. Hence why the rings would be imaginary. This also tracks with Diana since their affair allegedly happened in 2012. And gay marriage wasn't legalized in the States until 2015. To be honest though, apart from the words pretty baby, there's nothing else to really cement the fact that Taylor is talking about a woman in this song. So it's not too clear if she's using male pronouns as a cover-up or if she is actually just talking about a man. There's a couple of things which potentially point to Diana, for example the porch light, and Taylor met Diana before gay marriage was legalized. So whilst this song is worth mentioning, I think it belongs in the possibly sapphic pile. The next track we're going to be discussing is Guilty as Sin. Now, the title has both religious and remorseful associations, which suggests that this song could be about an affair that was either wrong or perceived as wrong by others. The lyrics read, "My boredom's bone deep. This cage was once just fine. Am I allowed to cry? I dream of cracking locks, throwing my life to the wolves, or the ocean rocks. Crashing into him tonight, he's a paradox." Now, these lines suggest to me that Taylor is fantasizing about breaking out of the metaphorical cage that she feels trapped in, potentially due to her public image, her career, or to the people around her. And she's fantasizing about throwing everything away and letting her career sink to the rocks over a person. And the reason I think this song is sapphic is I just don't really see how dating a man would ever sink Taylor's career, unless he was a convicted murderer. And even then, people would just be like, oh, she loves a bad boy, you know? And the other thing that supports the theory that this song is sapphic is the line, "Crashing into him tonight, he's a paradox." A paradox is described as a logically self-contradictory statement or a statement that runs contrary to one's expectation. So when Taylor is saying that he is a paradox, it certainly could be interpreted as what you think is he is in fact she. I keep these longings locked in lowercase inside a vault. Someone told me there's no such thing as bad thoughts, only your actions talk. Now, what's interesting about these lines is they mirror the exact same thing that gets said to lesbians and gay men by homophobic Christians. The whole it's okay to think gay thoughts, but acting upon it is a sin. And like I said, Taylor grew up in the Bible Belt, so it's not a huge stretch to imagine this being said to her about her sexuality. And as a result of this, she keeps her longings lowercase, quieter, smaller, and locked away in a vault. It's very likely that this is a reference to the fact that she's written quite a lot of openly sapphic songs that she hasn't shared with us yet as a result of this. However, be sure to make a note of this right here because it will be relevant later on in the video. What if I roll the stone away? They're gonna crucify me anyway. What if the way you hold me is actually what's holy? If long-suffering propriety is what they want from me, they don't know how you've haunted me so stunningly. I choose you and me religiously. So these lines are obviously very heavily infused with religious imagery and references, and really it's what makes me think that this song is about a same-sex relationship as opposed to an emotional affair with a man behind someone's back, particularly as she's talking about rolling the stone away, which means revealing a hidden part of herself that was previously covered up. And what if the way you hold me is actually what's holy? Is Taylor saying that what if the way this woman holds her is actually what's right? Because it's been drilled into her that being gay is wrong. If long-suffering propriety is what they want from me, they don't know how you've haunted me so stunningly also reinforces this. Taylor is saying that people want her to suffer under the illusion of respectability and correctness, but they don't know how much she feels for this person. So I just struggle to see how all of this would relate to a man. This song very much paints a picture of heteronormative expectations being placed on a person because they're seen as correct and moral, whereas homosexual relationships are seen as the opposite. I think this song is very telling, perhaps the most telling song on the entire album in regards to the homophobia Taylor has been subjected to and possibly internalized, and just how deeply this has impacted her. The next track that stood out to me as potentially sapphic is I Can Fix Him, No Really I Can. And the title is obviously a reference to the joke about the delusional notion of being able to fix a broken or toxic person with your influence just because you have a crush on them. Hence the No Really I Can in brackets. The smoke cloud billows out his mouth like a freight train through a small town. The jokes that he told across the bar were revolting and far too loud. They shake their heads saying, God help her, when I tell him he's my man. But your good Lord doesn't need to lift a finger. I can fix him. No, really, I can. And only I can. Now, the first thing that came to mind when looking at these lyrics was Liz. Yes, it's Taylor's conspiracy hours on this channel once again. And this is because, like I've said before, Liz was a wild card. She had an alleged drinking problem, and she allegedly caused a lot of issues, which is why she was asked to leave Taylor's band. And the lyrics to this song really remind me of I Knew You Were Trouble, which is a song that is also heavily theorised to be about Liz. And if you watch the music video for I Knew You Were Trouble and compare it to the lyrics here, you will see the connection. The other thing is, from the lines they shake their heads saying God help her, when I tell him he's my man, it's suggested that they are referring to Taylor because of the word man. But I think man could be a red herring, and in fact, God help her is aimed at the person Taylor is with. That said, my theories for this song are a lot more of a reach than my theories for the other tracks on this album, and I'm purely mentioning it just because the lyrics in this song really reminded me of her situation with Liz. That's it. It's a chance to talk about Taylor's. I'll take it. The next track I'm going to be discussing is Clara B. Now, the title is the name of the American actress Clara B, who rose to stardom during the silent film era of the 1920s. Now, in relation to Taylor, there's two very interesting aspects of Clara B which draw a connection between the two of them. The first is the tragedy behind the on-screen persona. Clara B had an incredibly traumatic life, and she's quoted as saying, "All the time the flapper is laughing and dancing, there's a feeling of tragedy underneath. She's unhappy and disillusioned, and that's what people sense." The notion of the person being different from what's projected on screen is obviously a prominent theme in the Tortured Poets department, with Taylor sharing the darker aspects of her life behind the scenes in this album. And the second is Clara B was heavily rumoured to be bisexual. However, it should be noted that whilst it's well documented that Clara B was gender non-conforming and certainly othered because of the period in which she became famous, she A, never confirmed herself as bisexual, and B, would have been under crippling pressures to engage in heteronormative relationships regardless of her sexuality anyway. So it's possible Taylor finds some or all of that relevant to her own situation as well, which is why she chose to include the figure of Clara B in this song. But looking at the lyrics, you look like Clara B in this light. Remarkable. All your life did you know you'd be picked like a rose? I'm not trying to exaggerate, but I think I might die if it happened. Die if it happened to me. No one in my small town thought I'd see the lights of Manhattan. This town is fake, but you're the real thing. Breath of fresh air through smoke rings. Take the glory, give everything, promise to be dazzling. Now, whilst this song is very obviously about fame, particularly about being a famous woman, in terms of a Sapphic deconstruction, it's worth noting that Diana Agron was obsessed with the 1920s. She once owned a property that was built in the 1920s, and interestingly, in an interview for Teen Vogue, Diana's hairdresser said he'd specifically done her hair in a style inspired by a 1920s Parisian flapper, which I thought was an interesting piece of information in connection to this song. And Diana was also a smoker, so there's another potential connection there too. Now, it may just be a coincidence, or it may be that Diana introduced Taylor to older movies and that period of history. I'm not sure, but I thought it was worth mentioning nonetheless. The next track we're going to be discussing is I'm Gonna Get You Back. Spacebar has left the building, and as we can see, the title is all in lowercase. Now, some of you might remember when we were discussing Guilty as Sin, Taylor wrote that she keeps her longings in lowercase locked inside a vault, which means it's likely that this song is from that same vault and about Sapphic longing. In other words, this song signals Taylor opening up to us. The lyrics read, "Lilac short skirt, the one that fits me like skin. Did your research, you knew the price going in. And I'll tell you one thing, honey, I can tell when somebody still wants me. Come clean. Standing at the bar like something's funny, bubbly. Once you fix your face, I'm going in." Now, the lilac short skirt could be either on the person Taylor is talking to, or it could be on herself. And don't forget, she has referenced sharing clothes with lovers before. So it could be that the skirt was once Taylor's and that she gave it to the muse. But either way, Taylor is clearly talking to a woman because the phrase "fix your face" is something said by women in reference to makeup. It creates the image that this woman is busy applying lipstick or foundation and Taylor is waiting until she's finished to approach her. Whether I'm gonna flip you off or pull you into the closet, I haven't decided yet. I mean, do I really need to point out the obvious here? Pull you into the closet is pretty transparent. Taylor is saying she's going to pull this woman into a closeted lifestyle with her. I can feel it coming, honey, in the way you move. Push the reset button. We're becoming something new. Say you've got somebody else. Say, I got someone too. Even if it's handcuffed, I'm leaving here with you. Bygones will be bygone. Era's fading into grey. Rebuild all the pieces, but still wanna play the game. Told my friends I hate you, but I love you just the same. Pick your poison, babe. I'm poison either way. So from these lines, Taylor is describing rekindling an old flame, knowing it could go either way. They might be endgame, or she might love and leave this woman as revenge for how she was treated. The line that really stood out to me here is Era's fading into grey. And I feel like this could suggest the heteronormative image Taylor has presented throughout all of her eras so far is potentially about to be a thing of the past. But yes, this song is pretty loud in terms of its sapphic content. She is being fruity on main, and this song is 1000% for the Sapphic vaults. The next track is the Albatross. Now, of course, an albatross is a bird. It's also the name of several bars and hotels. And interestingly, it's also related to a tattoo Diana Agron has, which is a quote from C.S. Lewis's Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which reads, "Courage, dear heart." And in the book, it's Aslan disguised as an albatross who says these words to Lucy. The lyrics read, "Wise men once said, wild winds are death to the candle. A rose by any other name is a scandal. Cautions issued, he stood, shooting the messengers. They tried to warn him about her. Cross your thoughtless heart. Only liquor anoints you. She is the albatross. She is here to destroy you." So these lines suggest that this song is about somebody being warned off from somebody else because they could potentially cause a scandal or general trouble. Wise men once said, one bad seed kills the garden, one less temptress, one less dagger to sharpen, locked me up in towers, but I'd visit you in dreams, and they tried to warn you about me. Now, these lines are interesting because it switches to first person, meaning that these people want to keep Taylor away from someone who is a woman. She's described as a temptress. And as a side note, I think it's interesting Taylor uses the words wise men here, as it implies that this situation is occurring because of the quote-unquote wisdom of men. And going by the other tracks on this album, where Taylor implies her father is a judgmental and controlling person, and considering he was the main male figure in her life growing up, so what he thought would have impacted her life. I don't think it's a crazy notion that the wise men she's talking about in this song are actually him. And one less dagger to sharpen implies that they have it out for any women who Taylor may be romantically tempted by. Taylor being warned about a woman also makes sense within the context of a relationship with one causing a scandal. However, Taylor dreams about this woman regardless. This seals this song as 100% Sapphic to me. So far, the Tortured Poets department very much gives the impression that either Taylor's family or the people around her were consistently trying to stop her from dating women and shame her for it, which must have been really difficult to deal with behind the scenes. And I'm really surprised at how candid she's being in this album about that. Devils that you know raise worse hell than a stranger. She's the death you chose, you're in terrible danger. And when that sky rains fire on you, and you're persona non grata, I'll tell you how I've been there too, and none of it matters. Wise men once read fake news, and they believed it. Jackals raised their hackles. You couldn't conceive it. You were sleeping soundly when they dragged you from your bed, and I tried to warn you about them. So I crossed my thoughtless heart, spread my wings like a parachute. I'm the Albatross. I swept in at the rescue. The devil that you know looks now more like an angel. So these lines are interesting, firstly because of the use of angels and devils. It reminds me of Cruel Summer, which we know is about Liz. Yes, take a shot whenever I mention Liz in this video. You will be very drunk very quickly. Because in the Lovers music video, Liz's birthday is on the Cruel Summer board game. There's no other explanation for that date being there. There's just not. And again, the lyrics in this song are just very reminiscent of what happened when Liz was removed from Taylor's life because of the potential issues it could cause. And it sounds like maybe Liz didn't take it seriously, but then when they really took action against her, Taylor took steps to prevent whatever awful thing was potentially going to happen. And again, there's this theme of wanting to be with someone when everybody else is out to destroy that relationship to avoid a scandal. So either way, this song is undeniably Sapphic, and I'm placing it in the vault. Next we have the track Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus. Now the title is taken from a line in the lyrics of this song which sure are interesting through a Sapphic lens. Your hologram stumbled into my apartment, hands in the hair of somebody in darkness, named Chloe or Sam or Sophia or Marcus, and I just watched it happen. From these lines, it's not clear if Taylor is referring to watching somebody else stumble into the apartment and have their hands in someone else's hair, or if she's talking to the person stumbling in the apartment and her hands are in the hair of somebody else. In either case, somebody here is bisexual. So if I sell my apartment and you have some kids with an internet starlet, will that make your memory fade from this scarlet maroon? Like it never happened. Now, Taylor owns a few apartments, but to me, the mention of an apartment calls to mind the 1989 and Reputation period of her life when she was living in New York. And interestingly, the colour scarlet represents adultery and betrayal. And of course, maroon could well be a reference to the song Maroon, which is heavily theorised to be about a woman too. So placing that together, potentially Taylor is is writing about an affair she had in New York with Maroon Woman behind somebody's back. Get it, girl? From the rest of the lyrics in this song, it really sounds to me like the person Taylor is writing about also had an addiction which caused Taylor to desert her, and also suggests that this person is somebody Taylor knew when she was much younger, which kind of tracks with the New York period of her life. And whilst this song is for the Sapphic Vault, it's still very much up for debate who Maroon Woman is. The mention of Scarlett suggests an affair which could potentially point to Carly. But in any case, the situation sounds messy as hell. So I'll be moving on now. Next up, we have Peter. Now, this title is a reference to Peter Pan, and I am 5,000% sure this song is about Diana Agron. And the lyrics are very telling of how much Taylor felt for her. They read, "Forgive me, Peter, my lost fearless leader, in closets like cedar, preserved from when we were just kids." So the first couple of lines of the song is how we know that Peter is a reference to Peter Pan, because of the line, "my lost fearless leader." Lost is a reference to the Lost Boys, who Peter Pan was the leader of, and the Lost Boys are also explicitly mentioned later on in the song, which confirms it. And the word lost has a double meaning here because Taylor is referring to the fact that she lost Diana from her life. Taylor has also referenced Peter Pan before in her song Cardigan, with Peter losing Wendy. We know Cardigan is about Diana, not just because she publicly streamed it and we all collectively lost our minds over that subtle confirmation, but because it's full of specific references to Diana and her relationship with Taylor. For example, the grocery store, the smoking, and the weekends together. And what further connects Diana to the name Peter is that she once referred to herself by that name on her website, youmeandcharlie.com. It's also worth noting Diana is a huge fan of children's books. She once had an Alice in Wonderland tattoo, which got removed after 1989 was released. A mystery as to why. And she also has a tattoo which is a quote from C.S. Lewis's The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So it tracks that she would also have a love for Peter Pan. In closets like cedar is also a point of interest because being in closets is a reference to being closeted, as in not out as bisexual or gay. And the closet being made out of cedar is also interesting because it's a Jewish custom to burn cedar wood to celebrate New Year, and Diana Agron is Jewish. The closets being preserved from when they were just kids could be a reference to the fact that Tay and Diana met when they were much younger, or it could be that they've both been closeted from a very young age. I think there's quite a few interpretations there. Then we have the lines, "Are you still a mind reader, a natural scene stealer?" And scene stealer suggests Taylor is talking about an actor, which Diana is. "I've heard great things, Peter, but life was always easier on you than it was on me." I think this is in reference to the fact that, from Taylor's perspective, she feels she has more pressure and expectations placed on her head in terms of fame and career than Diana does. And sometimes it gets me when crossing your jet stream, we both did the best we could do underneath the same moon in different galaxies. I think these lines are interesting because Taylor is saying that they both live on the same planet, but they inhabit two completely different worlds. And the world that Taylor inhabits is just not one where she's allowed to be herself. The entire Tortured Poets Department album makes that very clear. And I won't confess that I waited, but I let the lamp burn. As the men masqueraded, I hoped you'd return. Now, masquerade means pretend to be someone one is not. And what Taylor is saying here is that the men she dated after Diana were a pretense, and all the while she was hoping that the real thing, Diana, would come back to her. And this again connects back to the summary poem and the recurring theme of a disconnect between Taylor and men. This sounds like I'm writing fan fiction, but by God, it's some good fan fiction. With your feet on the ground, tell me all that you'd learned, 'cause love's never lost when perspective is earned. And you said you'd come back and get me, but you were 25, and the shelf life of those fantasies has expired. Lost to the lost boys, a chapter of your life. Forgive me, Peter, please know that I tried to hold on to the days when you were mine, but the woman who sits by the window has turned out the light. And what's interesting about the mention of 25 is that Diana was 24 years old when she was first publicly spotted with Taylor in 2011. And according to the evidence on the Swift Grandmaster post, 2012 was the year when Diana and Taylor's affair both began and ended. The same year, Diana was 25, which also supports the theory that this song is about her. Diana, come and get your woman. She's sorry. She's sorry for whatever she did. She's a Sagittarius. She needs to be forgiven once or 200 times, you know? To be fair, I have no idea what Diana had to put up with, so, I'm staying out of it. The next track we're going to be discussing is I Hate It Here. And the title is a common phrase you may see on the interwebs from time to time, but the here in I Hate It Here doesn't necessarily refer to a place. For example, you could be going through a stressful situation and therefore you might say, I hate it here. And I've included this song in the video because it contains themes of secrecy and yearning for escape, both of which are god-tier Sapphic themes. So let's just take a look at the lyrics. Tell me something awful, like you are a poet, trapped inside the body of a finance guy. Tell me all your secrets. All you'll ever be is my eternal consolation prize. So what's interesting here is Taylor is talking to a guy and she's telling him that all he will ever be is not what she really wants. He will always be second place. Now, if this is because what she really wants is a woman, or because she feels that no one is able to live up to her romantic expectations, or a combination of the two, is up for interpretation. And again, this connects back to the summary poem I was discussing earlier and reiterates the notion of a disconnect between Taylor and men. You see, I was a debutante in another life, but now I seem to be scared to go outside. If comfort is a construct, I don't believe in good luck. Now that I know what's what, I hate it here, so I will go to secret gardens in my mind. People need a key to get to, the only one is mine. I read about it in a book when I was a precocious child. No mid-sized city hopes and small-town fears. I'm there most of the year, 'cause I hate it here. So, Taylor references the book The Secret Garden, and she's using that concept of the secret garden as a place of escapism because she's so unhappy where she is, and like I said, here doesn't have to refer to a place. It can also be about what she's experiencing. I also think it's interesting that Taylor mentions small town fears because there's a lot of associations between small towns and small minds. So people who would be potentially unaccepting of her sexuality or just who she is in general are perhaps what she wants to escape from. I'm lonely, but I'm good. I'm bitter, but I swear I'm fine. I'll save all my romanticism for my inner life, and I'll get lost on purpose. This place made me feel worthless. Lucid dreams, like electricity. The current flies through me, and in my fantasies, I rise above it. And way up there, I actually love it. So again, these lines suggest that Taylor's inner world is a sanctuary from the life that she's been living and the people she's been surrounded by who make her feel lonely. She feels othered, and this suggests that she's unable to connect with these people, which runs parallel to a lot of the Sapphic experience. This song is not necessarily about Taylor's feelings for a woman, but it's interesting that she starts this song off by telling a guy he could only ever be a consolation prize, and then going on to describe how she saves her romanticism for her inner world. Again, there's a lot of parallels to the Sapphic experience here, which means this track goes in the Sapphic vault. I mean, what lesbian doesn't want to escape their small town? It's the prom. Overall, this album had way more sapphic themes and connections than I thought it would, all of which were really interesting to deconstruct. The tea was piping, and we have more gay conspiracy theory files to add to the library. That said, I don't think the sapphic themes in this album are necessarily that much different to what we've seen in her work before. For example, the intertwining of romance with religion, secrecy, rainbows, yearning, switching up pronouns and perspectives, and so on. This is all very familiar to us by now. That said, even though she's still playing the game, for anyone paying close enough attention, it's observable that she is slowly opening up more and more through her lyrics. And if you compare the Tortured Poets department to her earlier works, in terms of imagery and wording around female muses, you can see the difference in her transparency. And for her to take these small, subtle steps in her songwriting to be more visible takes a lot of bravery, especially considering the picture she's painted in the Tortured Poets department about the homophobia she's been subjected to behind the scenes, and the choices she's had to make for the benefit of her career up to this point. What I do feel is different from before is the level of frustration she has at the fact that her career is trapped by convention. You know, there's a lot of bird and cage imagery surrounding the Tortured Poets department, and I think that's kind of related to it. And it sounds to me like that's beginning to wear seriously thin for her. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some big changes in her image and in her work relatively soon because of this. It must be strange for her to look at artists like Renee Rapp, who are able to just be very kind of open about who they are and, you know, express that in their works without having to kind of disguise everything and hide everything like it's the 1920s, funnily enough. Speaking of the 1920s, I think it's really interesting that Taylor included the figure of Clara B in her work, because from a sapphic perspective, in a lot of ways, Tate is living as though she's in the 1920s. All of the sapphic themes in her work, like I said, are either alluded to, disguised with male pronouns, written from a quote-unquote male perspective, or intertwined with other themes which leave it open for interpretation, and therefore allow her to express herself without facing any consequences. And all of those techniques were very commonly utilised in lesbian and sapphic literature in the early 20th century, particularly the 1920s. Because of course, same-sex relationships were frowned upon and certainly not thought of as appealing or profitable for a largely heteronormative society. It would have been very hard to build a career selling lesbian romance. The question is that still necessary and relevant in 2024? And is she still doing it for her own gain, or is she doing it to appease other people? And also, you know, how healthy is that? Because it is a result of either internalized homophobia or wider societal homophobia. I understand why she does it. I just think I find it hard to kind of like relate to, I suppose. But we lead two very different lives, so, you know. It kind of feels like the world has changed a bit, right? And it's not the 1920s anymore, you know? In the Tortured Poets department, Tay paints a picture of what has gone on behind the scenes, behind the glamorous front, and how unhappy she is as a result of consistently having to compromise and hide her relationships for the sake of her brand and the people around her. And this suggests that other people may be the reason that she still feels the need to kind of hide her sapphic relationships. And that's the tip of the iceberg, because her relationship with fame, self-image, mental health, and so on would all also, you know, impact her relationship with her sexuality and visibility. I think once upon a time it was very much the cold hard truth that, you know, heteronormativity prevailed, and if you wanted any kind of career in film, in music, in literature, you had to make art that was palatable and relatable to a largely heteronormative audience, right? It just makes sense, but I don't know that that's still the case in 2024. I mean, that said, who knows? It's all up for interpretation, so who knows what's going on there? Not I. Okay, personal opinions on the Tortured Poets department as an audio experience. I agree with other people who have said that this album is for the fans. It's not for the masses. So as a fan, I found this album lyrically fascinating. And like I said, this album is really interesting to deconstruct through a sapphic lens. But in terms of kind of general enjoyment of the album, as in kind of like switch off, kick back, and vibe, the album was a mixed bag for me, I have to be honest. I appreciate that this album is a much more raw and substantial piece of work. It's not designed to be superficially palatable for the masses, and it's not designed to be radio friendly, which most albums, especially by bigger pop artists, usually are. The Tortured Poets department requires something more of the listener. And on the one hand, I think it's refreshing and more in tune with her recent lyrical evolution as an artist. But on the other hand, I felt like some of the songs droned on to the point where I kind of wanted to skip them. I can't lie, like I can't sit here and lie. There were points where I was like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. It's a listening and ruminating experience, and I wasn't like expecting that going in. So I think that's probably why it threw me off a bit. That said, if it was supposed to be more of a listening and ruminating experience, I honestly think that some of the songs on the album would have worked better as spoken word. Or that she could have just released this whole album as a poetry book and an audio book instead of a musical album. I would love for her to do spoken word for professional, lesbian, personal science reasons. Yeah. I like the album, I just don't know how much I'm going to kind of replay it over and over again, like I do with almost all of her other albums. Editing test here. I recorded this video 5 days ago and I have actually been playing some of the songs from this album on repeat, so that was a goddamn lie. I am made of lies and deceit. And it's fine, not every single album that she releases is going to be folklore, is going to be read, you know? And the Tortured Poets department brings other things to the table and also showcases her artistic growth. So cool. I'd love to know everybody else's thoughts on the albums and any sapphic themes or theories that I may have missed. Please leave them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe for instant disappointment, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!